is Reverend Nikolai Blaskow. He's a chaplain at Reverend College, and besides being a religious leader and a wonderful teacher, as I was told today, Reverend enjoys making films and has written a number of screenplays. In relation to Anglican Diocese Office, that's located in Canberra, it works to maintain effective communication with diocesan entities and assist the overall strategic development of the Anglican Church in Canberra and Goulburn region. So please welcome Reverend Nikolai Blaskow.
Thank you so much, Mohammed, and thank you, Dean, and thank you, Auntie Ruth, and distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen. I can't tell you how happy I am to be here today. I'm also a displaced person who came to this country in the post-war migration scheme, and I have a great heart for anyone that struggles to come to this country and find peace. And a gathering like this just warms my heart, it truly does. Apart from being the chaplain at Radford College, I'm also the head of Religious and Values Education. So we make very certain that our students encounter all the different faiths, and that they are broad-minded, and that they are rigorous in their understanding. And so it's really a joy to be with you this afternoon. I've entitled my talk, "There is Room for the Other," and the subtitle is "The Ever-Expanding Horizon." Today in the Anglican and Roman Catholic Christian calendar, we celebrate the Feast of All Saints, a time when we acknowledge those who have died in the faith, who have inspired us. None more than the Cistercian monks in Algeria, who were murdered in 1996 by extremists for no other reason than they were foreigners, Christian, and wait for it, friends of their Muslim sisters and brothers. It is to them and a Jewish saint called Eti Hillesum, who died in Auschwitz on the 30th of November 1943 at the age of 29, and also a remarkable man, a secularist and philosopher named Jan Patočka, or Patočka, who gave his life for the cause of freedom. I dedicate this address to them as we consider the question, interfaith harmony, where are we? The power of a question, and that sort of question in particular, is that it exposes us for where we are, what we understand, and what remains difficult for us. Christian Chergé and his monks were very challenged by their experience of living among their Muslim sisters and brothers, for such a life called into question their own certainties about their own faith. And I would suggest that probably their Muslim sisters and brothers too were challenged to reconsider or to revise or to whatever their own convictions. Curiously, it was through a Sufi group called Alainis of Medea, who joined their prayer festival called the Ribat for the first time on All Saints' Day today, that helped them understand how they might work and pray together. Quoting from the Quran 41 and 53, these beautiful people came to this prayer festival with these words: "We will show them our signs on the horizons and within themselves." What does this mean other than to embrace openness of heart and an open horizon that we encounter with great love and without fear? Their feelings that day, which they expressed, echo mine. We wish here to leave to God the possibility of creating between us something new. And I think that their conviction of something new emerging through common prayer is absolutely right. An action that will bring us closer to that goal of harmony. Because in that zone of prayer, in these anxious and troubled and violent times, God comes to us beyond the horizon of our reason, and I might dare say, beyond even our faith traditions, to challenge us to a broader and wider and more inclusive faith. One of the most moving experiences I've ever experienced was at the City University Great Hall, when Jews, Christians and Muslims, all grieving for their loved ones who had died of cancer, met together in the hall. They were of different faiths, but they all came with the one hole in their heart, as it were, to grieve those who had died. Truly, God came to us in those moments, beyond the horizon of our reason, and through our common shared grief. We are each of us, ladies and gentlemen, in our respective faith traditions, pilgrims of the horizon, which forever opens before us. Christian Cherchet speaks, for example, of Islam and Christianity like Jacob's ladder, as two parallel posts with their point of meeting in the infinite, both laid in the earth, fertilized by the same dung, suffering, sickness, death, both oriented towards the same hope, both pointing towards the heavens. The story of Jacob, given to us by Judaism, reminds us that we are all human beings who have our bed on the earth, our nose in the air, and our dreams of the ladder that will take us out of ourselves, a dream common to all humanity. A dream of hope that Cherchet saw bathed in humility, since the heart of the Paschal mystery is to be found in the self-offering of, the self-emptying, the self-giving of the Son, which, the self-emptying, became for him an attitude of mind to follow, for a significant consequence of living out his commitment in a Muslim community was the loosening of his own certainties. Moreover, living alongside others who prayed differently, challenged Christian to imagine his faith against a much larger canvas. So he began to realize that if all human beings bear the divine imprint, then his Muslim neighbors truly become fellow pilgrims of the horizon, and so open to the idea and the practice of living with a radical openness to the new story that unfolds along all of their journey together. Christian Cherchet, like me, was often impatient with theological discussion as a means of interfaith dialogue because that kind of discussion tended to close everything down rather than open it up. Whereas through the concrete experience of living together, praying together, living with difference, painful as it might be at times, often confronting something other, was more likely to emerge in that context than it was in a theological debate. The matter of otherness and the other preoccupied Cherchet. He asked himself, who is the other? What does it mean to be other among others? These were questions with which he became obsessed as he came to realize that to entertain these thoughts was not a dissolving of differences, but could become a destabilization of identity with positive results, which allow for fruitful encounters from which something new might emerge. As Salenson in his monastic life remarks, interreligious dialogue forces one to address the fact of difference with true seriousness, with radical seriousness. Christian Cherchet and his monks, over time, came not to fear difference. Indeed, they came to read difference as a sacramental gift, as something coming directly from God, not to be fought, but to be received as a wonderful, wonderful gift. He writes, Dieu nous fait de ce qu'il est. God makes us who he is. The issue of difference and sameness, unity, difference, diversity, is a gift from God. He continues, the difference between Christians and Muslims is dependent on a reality that is vaster, more secret, this union from which all people carry within themselves a kind of nostalgia. And of course, it could be said of every faith tradition represented in this room today, be it Hindu, Buddhist, Sikh, or any other. When Christian, or Christian, I will say Christian to confuse, so as not to confuse you. When Christian speaks of Christians and Muslims, he uses the following expression: les uns, les autres. One another. And the French is a bit more communicative than that. The ones and the others. When he speaks of the latter, he talks about l'un et l'autre. That is one side of the ladder and the other side of the ladder. They are all linked horizontally. We are truly, ladies and gentlemen, in this adventure of life together. And what a gift we are to each other. Violent, unforgiving times call for radical measures and a solidarity that goes much, much further than just words. As you know, my wife Susanna, who sends her greetings to you today, she would have been here today. She is the Anglican priest at Holy Covenant, and her very last day will be tomorrow. How she had to fight for women's ministry in her own church. But she decided, with a lot of other Christian leaders, to wear the hijab for a week. And it was a wonderful experience. Within 20 minutes of putting on the hijab on a Sunday afternoon, one lady was accosted by Muslim women, actually was run after by Muslim women in the Jamison Center. And they said, "Are you Muslim?" I said, "No, we're Christians, but we're standing with you in solidarity." Every time I tell that story, I want to cry, and I do so in front of my students, because it was a beautiful moment. Why should Muslim women have to endure this terrible intolerance? And of course, it's not just to religious people that intolerance is expressed. I know a member of our congregation who is a doctor in psychology, who happens to have cerebral palsy, was walking down one of these streets here and was spat upon by two 70-year-old boys. What possessed them to do that? I have no idea, other than that she was other and she was different, and they took a surface view of who she was and they judged her on it. Clearly, Christian Churchet had learned his lesson of living with the other and practiced it almost on another plane of existence, and set us all at a very formidable benchmark. You see, on January the 1st, 1994, after their first encounter with extremists in Algeria, and after their decision, which was arrived at with great difficulty, to stay in solidarity with their Muslim sisters and brothers, Christian wrote, among other things, in his last testament, these remarkable words dedicated to the one who eventually would murder him and take his life. And I read it to you as it is in the original. "And also you, my last minute friend, who will not know what you were doing. Yes, I want this, thank you, and this adieu to be for you too, because in God's face, I see yours. May we meet again as happy thieves in paradise, if it please God, the Father of us both." Eddie Hillesong, whom I mentioned just a little earlier, was reading, I think, from the same script when she struggled in Westbrook, a transition camp for Auschwitz, not to let herself be consumed by concern for her family. And in one of her last letters, which she wrote from Westerbork, undated but written after the 18th of August 1943, she notes, "I know that we must not lose ourselves so completely in grief and concern for our families that we have little thought or love left for our neighbors. More and more, I tend toward the idea," she writes, she was 29 by the way when she wrote this, "that love for everyone who may cross your path, love for everybody made in God's image, must rise above love for blood relatives. Please don't misunderstand me. It may seem unnatural, and I see that it is still too far difficult for me to write about, but though so simple to live. I finish with a stirring example taken from a quite different context, in order, I trust, to open all of our eyes and our vision to include even those without faith of any kind. And I'm so pleased that Dean mentioned that point. It comes from the Charter 77 movement, which was conducted in Czechoslovakia, dedicated to recreating the sort of social space, above all the freedom of speech, which we all require to thrive, which is being exemplified in this room today. Under the inspiring leadership of Václav Havel and Jan Patočka. Patočka, an elderly and frail man, died during his interrogation by the secret police in Czechoslovakia in March 1977. He was the first one to use the term solidarity of the shaken. And by that he meant the shared human experience of trauma, particularly that lived out within an historical system or time period that is alive. A grimly disturbing experience that produced a determination to rethink one's moral attitude to the world, to reconstruct one's life accordingly. And to that vision, Patočka called together in solidarity, wait for the list, it's extraordinary, Catholics, Protestants, atheists, agnostics, anarchists, social democrats, liberals, conservatives, and if he was in this room, he would have called all of us in solidarity, to stand up together. Of them, Patočka writes, they do not take upon themselves any political rights or functions, nor do they want to be a moral authority or the conscience of society. They do not raise themselves above anyone or pass judgments on anyone. Their effort is aimed exclusively at cleansing and reinforcing the awareness that a high authority does exist. An authority drawn from our common humanity, our common sense of shakenness, whatever the circumstances, whatever the form. Finally, let me conclude with this. Earlier in the Testament, Cherche had written, I would like, when the time comes, to have a moment of spiritual clarity which would allow me to beg forgiveness of God and my fellow human beings, and at the same time forgive with all my heart the one who will strike me down. And God knows, sisters and brothers, on the horizon journey together, there'll be a lot of forgiving to do today and tomorrow. Let us be there for one another and for those without faith in an unpatronizing and genuinely selfless way, because we recognize our common humanity made with all of its differences in the image of God. Jesus said to the Samaritan woman at the well, believe me, woman, the time is coming when you Samaritans will worship the Father, neither here at this mountain nor there in Jerusalem. But the time is coming, it has come, when what you've called will not matter, and where you go to worship will not matter. It's who you are and the way you live that count before God. Your worship must engage your spirit in the pursuit of truth. That's the kind of people the Father is looking for. Those who are simply and honestly themselves and before Him in their worship. God is sheer being, itself spirit. Those who worship Him must do it out of their very being, their spirits, and their true selves in adoration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Reverend, for your very noble and kind thoughts. The point I'll take home will be, among so many, the difference is given to us by God as a gift, and it's sacred. It must be received rather than fought. So that is just a wonderful, wonderful thought among so many. I think I'm conscious of the time.